Detroit. His innovation and his innovative and visionary approach made the International Detroit Black Expo one of the largest expositions in America. He earned his dual PhD, I guess that means he's doctor, at Michigan State in African American and African Studies and in economics with specialization in business and entrepreneurship. He has tremendous energy. As president and CEO of the National Business League, he leads an organization encompassing 365 local leagues, 150,000 members. He's known for addressing societal and economic challenges, especially in the Black and Brown communities. I know you're going to join me in giving a virtual welcome to Dr. Kenneth Harris. Professor, we're looking forward to hearing from you this morning. Thank you and welcome.
Man, can I say energy? I don't know if I can top yours, Rand. Thank you so much for such a warm reading of my short bio this morning. And I want to thank Stephanie for coordinating this. And most importantly, to the Michigan Bankers Association, which at this time is so critical in terms of our focus for the future. This discussion today with my background, which I won't belabor, I'll just have a few slides that I'll put up and kind of walk us through as we have obviously finished Women's Month and the month before Black History Month. And all of us have experienced COVID-19 and the pandemic, along with so much transgression regarding racial injustice and things of that nature. And so up early this morning, I will run us through a nice historical session that I think that you all may enjoy. I'll answer some questions and I'll also give some reference materials for those who may have further interest. And so what I'll do is share my screen here and pull up the presentation. Fortunately, I have been able to pretty much speak 2 or 3 times a week regarding this subject matter, especially over the last several months. We have had the opportunity to keynote speech for Toyota Motor Company, General Motors, and several other major Fortune 500 companies. And the dialogue has been extremely positive, especially from the top to the bottom. I think this is a great time as we all, what I call the solution revolution. We obviously know that there are problems that exist, but we are here as leaders in our prospective chosen endeavors and positions in life to provide solutions, to come up with solutions, and to implement and execute solutions so that we can make our world and our country a better place. And so with that, I titled this session, Racial Equity in the Age of the Unbanked, which I think is a really relevant conversation at this time. And my organization, again, a little bit was told about me. I am a Detroit native. I could bounce a ball pretty good. I ended up getting a full basketball scholarship to Clark Atlanta University. I did my bachelor's and first master's in Atlanta, Georgia, in counseling and clinical psych. Then I went on and came back here and dabbled into politics a little bit and was the chief of staff for the now Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence many years when she first became the mayor of Southfield. And then went on to so many other roles in which eventually I earned my PhD in economics and Black studies from Michigan State University. I went on to found the Detroit Black Expo, which became one of the largest expositions for Black businesses in the country in my late and early 30s, and became the executive vice president for what you all call now the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council. It used to be called MMBDC back when I was in a leadership role in my early 30s. and then went on to lead the state's first Michigan Black Chamber of Commerce, which became the largest chamber of commerce in the country, where we had established chapters in just about every urban environment in the state of Michigan. And then as of 2017, I was appointed to lead the National Business League, which is the oldest and first Black business organization in the entire country, founded by the iconic Booker T. Washington in 1900. So I'm the steward of his legacy, and I have come into existence to put some armor on some of these 120-year-old tires, if that makes any sense. And so thank you, Rand, again, for your leadership. I also want to thank Patricia. I know she couldn't be on this call today, but her advocacy has led us to this point to where I think we're going to do some wonderful things to educate people in the marketplace together in the future. And so I look forward to working with you. With that being said, we'll dig right into it. As to, I always like to start out with a pictorial scenario that tells us that although at the height of this discussion today, where we are talking about race and the aspects of race, race is really an invention. Based on historical knowledge. If you all have not read the book, The Invention of the White Race by Dr. Theodore Allen, it's a book that you must get, ladies and gentlemen. And it really paints the picture of how we can improve society. To be honest with you, when this country first started, there was no such thing as race. When indentured servants and folks came in terms of wanting to pay their debt by coming over to this newfound land that was already indigenous to millions of people that were here already. They didn't identify themselves by the color of their skin. Rather fact, it was more cultural, religious and ethnic than anything. And so based on that, the ruling class elite, which experienced what we call the Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, if you all know that history, it really highlights the fact that not only were indentured service and slaves, if you base it on phenotype or skin color, were white and Black, right? And had a certain relegated status in society, and they got fed up and they rose up against the ruling class white elite, where poor whites and slaves and indentured servers actually teamed up together and overthrew the ruling class. And so, as you know, this sent shockwaves through the rest of the country with this unrest. And from that standpoint, in the late 17th century, we found ourselves with a new socioeconomic control system that was put in place to make sure that we could never have this type of rebellion again, that the ruling class could rule over the entire planet, and that privileges would be given based on race, and everyone else based on phenotype and skin color would be reduced to a caste system, and misogyny was put in place as well, as to where the woman was removed from any form of power within the system. And so with that, as you know, based on the historical trajectory, the 13th and 14th Amendment allowed for not only the freedom of slaves, but some form of reparation, some form of voting rights, and led to the Reconstruction period, which was the fastest growth period for free slaves in the entire country. You had elected US senators, US Congress people who were Black, you had bankers, you had lawyers, you had everyone who didn't have a formal education move in this short period of time faster than any type of progress known to mankind. And with that, again, that startled the ruling class. And that ruling class, again, because of the tremendous amount of growth that was taking place in such a short amount of time, laws were implemented right away to make sure that Blacks never really evolved from slavery, but evolved to another form. And so Black codes were created to restrict Black people and minorities from ever participating in the economic mainstream of society. And so with that, these different laws that had taken place that actually created the first Black bank. Most people don't know the Freedmen's Bank was created by the federal government. And that bank held the monies of folks who have fought in the Civil War, held deposits of landowners who were supposed to receive their full 40 acres and a mule in terms of reparations for slavery. And soon after the assassination of President Lincoln, what happened is those laws were turned back. The bank was shut down, it was ran into the ground, it was robbed, it was thieved, it was embezzled. And from that standpoint, this is where the trust factor that still remains today, where Black and Indigenous and minority folks do not trust the banking system because of what happened during the Reconstruction period with the shutdown and complete running in of the Freedmen's Bank. So when we say, why aren't we able to connect in urban environments and in urban and communities? It's because of some of these historical ramifications that took place. And as you probably don't remember, but I know in Black and urban communities, grandma always kept her money under the mattress. She never put it in the bank because they never trusted that their money would be spent wisely. So we have a lot of work to do in the future in establishing trust and establishing meaningful trust, that we know that if there is a relationship with our bank, there's the possibility and the access for potential financial growth and wealth and development in urban sectors and rural areas as well. With that being said, again, these laws were instituted right away during the Reconstruction period. You had Black codes, you had Jim Crow segregation, and then to enforce that Blacks and Indigenous people never entered into the mainstream, organizations sprouted up like the KKK that made sure that when communities start to form businesses and things that nature, this group would come in to really harass and make sure that there was never any real growth. And so upon that, the Black Power movement started. And with that movement, it was a time where Blacks said, it's time for us to not accept this current system that is in place, the lynchings, the murders, the rapings, the killings, the segregation, everything that came along with it, and to stand against it. And so with that, that led us into what we see today, the Civil Rights Act, which took place to allow for us some civil liberties fought by so many different battles from the early 1900s all the way up to the 1960s, where you had major leaders like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael and Angela Davis, and the colleges and universities where students rose up against the established ruling class elite and birthed at least a semblance of a law in which we are calling civil half rights because it did not include economic language. So if you see a consistency throughout time, Blacks and Indigenous people have been successful educationally, politically, socially, but where we have not turned the corner is economically. And there has been a reason for that. And I think that that is the focus today. And so with that, racism never went away. There's never been a colorblind society, even with the election of the first Black president. Actually, racism has intensified because of technology. I has been more focused on incidents that allow for us to reflect. And so what I say is racism has evolved, not in your more traditional form, but in terms of institutions, systems, and structures where we must take a real look at ourselves again to find solutions. So this is an opportunity again for the solution revolution. And with that being said, 50 years later, post civil rights, we find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic. We find ourselves in the midst of institutions like the police, who were actually founded on the plantation to monitor the slaves from ever leaving the plantation, and in which we witness today in our community some extreme confrontation and still brutality that exists, in which the nation responded. The nation responded to the health crisis, which became an economic crisis, and especially in Michigan, there was an economic shutdown to a certain degree, which disproportionately impacted Black and Indigenous people as well. With that, you saw the heightened tension towards Black Lives Matter, which became not just a local, regional, and national movement, but also a global movement that sparked change towards equity and inclusion all across the world. And so here we are today with a major discussion on inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and social justice, which I believe are the focal points of where we are now pivoting into solutions. People from leadership from major institutions, systems, and structures are now looking internally to say, how do we improve upon the 400 years of exclusion of a particular race based on policies that existed, and how do we 150 years later, post civil rights, see that we have not moved the needle in terms of racial inclusion and equity in this country. Now, let me set a narrative for everyone as well. In the next 15 to 20 years, the majority of this country will become Black and brown. This is inevitable. There's no stopping evolution. The future marketplace and the future consumer, the future depositor at the bank will be a Black and brown citizen of the United States. This is based on data and statistics, and more importantly, more Black and brown babies being born a decade ago than there has been the majority population. And so this is inevitable. And so it's something that we cannot not ignore. We have to pay attention and prepare for the future economy of this country. And so with that, in terms of traditional banking, things of that nature, there has been a real disconnect. We were able to witness it with the federal government and the response to the pandemic, and the first stimulus of $2 trillion and the CARES Act, which took place, totally missed minorities and indigenous and Black and brown people across the country. And to that fact, most small businesses in America, where the wealthy and a well-connected benefited once again. And we see this dichotomy taking place that existed almost 150 years ago. So we have work to do. We have solutions to create. What's even more exciting at this time, there's more than 2.6 million Black-owned businesses across the country. There are more than 13.3 minority businesses of color that exist across the country. And 90% of those 13.6 minority businesses of color are between 1 and 3 employees. And so this is the marketplace that I believe is the future economy. 70% of all business in this country is led by small businesses between 1 and 10 employees, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, or gender. And most importantly, this economy that what I call is the unbanked economy, because they don't have a traditional or working relationship with our traditional banking system. And so we must improve in that area to build trust, to build relationships. And as I would tell small business owners, it's time to date your banker and to get to know your banker and build relationships so that when capital opportunities become available, and even before capital opportunities become available, you can start to prepare yourself in a number of different ways to access capital. And I think that is so important if we are going to improve our economies and create robust economies. And so with that being said, again, I mentioned where we are today in terms of the solution revolution. Our economic recovery response has to be inclusive and diverse, equitable, and measurable. And as a economist, if you can't measure it, if there's no data behind it, in my eyes, it doesn't exist. And so we need measurable results to improve our systems, institutions, and structures. And we must not have a benign neglect approach. In terms of identifying race, which is also acknowledged in the US Census. So as long as the US Census acknowledges race, it's always going to be at the forefront of our structures and institutions. And so we must call Black for what it is. We must call Asian for what it is. We must call Hispanic for what it is. These benign neglect terms like minority is going to die out because soon the minority will be the majority. So we must think ahead. We must not use terms when we're talking about specific racial groups like people of color, etc. We must identify and start to measure based on how we excluded in the beginning, which is in terms of race. And so it's a great time for change. And I'll kind of go into some action points. It's not new to everyone. But again, I love to inform and educate as I finish up these last 2 slides. And workforce diversity, equity, and inclusion defined. Inclusion is where a company works towards a culture that is inclusive, where everyone belongs. Equity is when systems and processes are evaluated to remove biases and equitable leadership practices that are put in place to ensure that inclusion is met. And diversity is when the workplace inclusion and equity are made a priority and diverse talent is attracted and retained. And like I said, when I go into major Fortune 500 companies, of which we have over 125 Fortune 500 partners in my organization, and I speak to CEOs, the first question that I ask is, when I walk in the office, I look around the office and I say, do I see diversity when I first come into the office? The second thing is I say, can I see your board of directors? What does your board look like? Do you have a diverse board, etc.? The second thing is, what does your executive leadership look like with people who have control, power, and influence in the organization? Is that diverse, right? And does it have people of color with the ability of not being a glorified secretary? And most importantly, I say, what does your philanthropic endeavors look like? What does your supply chain look like? Are you bringing in diverse vendors and contractors? And what does your marketing and advertising look like? Is it all white folks on your marketing materials, or does it look like the America that is truly here today and what it will look like in the future? And so these are some just wonderful opportunities. And what I call in the business segment, growth opportunity areas is not about pointing out the problems of where we are today, but it's being as true leaders, identifying the problem, and again, bringing everyone together to find solutions. And this is why I love what I'm seeing across America. You're seeing Black economic empowerment programs being put in place. Goldman Sachs announced $1 billion to promote Black women. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been announced by Google and Facebook. You've had major Fortune 500 companies put Black business programs together. American Express last year, we gave out $10 million in small business grants to Black-owned businesses. Comcast, we just finished another major run in the Black community and giving out $5 million in small business grants to help in the economic recovery aspect. And again, I think leaders are now stepping up. White CEO men in Fortune 500 companies are saying, we want to be competitive for the future, and let's have America and our companies look like the diverse communities that we serve. And so with that, again, I mentioned diversity and inclusion task force. If there isn't one at your bank or your company, those things should be established and implemented, data-driven goals and objectives, taking a look at your board of directors, your executive leadership, your supply chain, your marketing and advertising, and your corporate responsibility, philanthropic goals, also talent placement and acquisition, where you recruit, retain, and reward diverse and people of color within the workplace, and then culture and affinity groups, where these individuals and cultures and racial groups have the opportunity to form their own groups in the company, to have a voice and to feel accepted and appreciated. And then last but not least, providing resources and partnering with the community is absolutely essential. And so with that being said, I'll go to question and answers. But before I do that, I always, as I do with my students, give reading materials. And here are some wonderful books that I think those who are interested on the subject matter can take a look at. When Affirmative Action Was White is a great book. If you don't know the untold history of racial inequality in the 20th century, please take a look at the professor's book, where it highlights how whites were given affirmative action during the Reconstruction period and also the early 1900s. White Rage, the unspoken truth of racial divide in our country. Everyone has heard Dr. D'Angelo's book, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard to Have a Conversation about Racism. Another great book, The Cost of Privilege, taking on the system of white supremacy and racism, and the cost, how we are actually losing money by practicing this failed economic policy of racism. It actually hurts the economy. And then Dr. Kendi, in which you all have probably heard, How to Be an Anti-Racist, the great book that was just featured on Oprah, Caste, about the caste system that is here, both locally and globally, and then Weapons of Whiteness, and how actual whiteness has been used to make sure that certain people in the workplace, et cetera, have been relegated to a certain status and that they stay in that status. That is not a healthy company. We must change those ways. And the last three, The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by Dr. Baradorin. I know I see Kenneth Kelly on the call. I know he has hosted seminars and things of that nature. But if you want to know the history of banking in America and its discriminatory and policy-oriented scenarios of why we are where we are today, this is a great book. And last but not least, The New Jim Crow. Slavery never went away. It just evolved in the age of color blindness, which this mythological term that has been created. And then The Color of Law, how segregation and laws and policy have actually created the types of economies that we see today, which are restricted based on race. And so with that, I'll send that list to you all. I'll go back. Again, if you want my information, I can send you links towards diversity and inclusion. My contact information is 313-818-3017. You can always email me, kharris@nationalbusinessleague.org, or visit our website, and I will answer any questions and answers because it's almost tax time. All right.
Thanks for ending. Kenneth, thank you so much. And we appreciate you sharing your slides with us as we go back to the full screen. And if you can email those to us, we can be sure and share those more broadly. Absolutely. We're grateful for your time today and your perspectives. And it looks like Chris Nugent has a question. His hand is raised. Chris?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Harris, for your talk today. Very thought-invoking. I was checking off the checklist, or trying to, as you were going through there, and I give my organization maybe about a C+. So there's some work to do. I'm in Lansing for Horizon Bank, and like I've been trying to engage a gentleman I know well to be on our advisory board. I think we've done a pretty good job supporting some of the philanthropic and nonprofit things around Lansing. I think our marketing's in pretty good shape. But a couple of specific questions. One, recruiting Black professionals to work in the bank has always been something that's been difficult. I would love, to have an African-American commercial loan officer on our staff. And it just seems over the years, I've known gentlemen and ladies around Lansing, but recruiting them to work for a specific institution. Any tips there? And then just overall trying to get the Black business owner. I've been looking for a Lansing chapter of the of like the Black Chamber of Commerce in Lansing, if there's a chapter. So if you could just comment any tips you have there.
Oh, no question about it. And believe me, you're not the only one having this conversation at this time. Talent placement and acquisition is at the top of the list. And I'm seeing a real response from the banking and financial industry. One is establishing relationships with historically Black colleges and universities, in which, if you don't know, there are roughly over 170 or so HBCUs across the country who have wonderful talent coming out every single day. And to establish the type of recruitment programs, even virtually and electronically, you were able to tap into a lot of different talent from that perspective. I also mentioned retention and recruitment. So not only is it important to recruit diverse talent and Black talent in particular, to have the environment that is supportive. So we also are seeing a lot of great recruiting going on, but the high retention rate is also taking place. So you'll bring in a qualified individual and they're gone after a year. They're gone after 6 months. And so it's a internal process that we also have to take a look at as well. And then again, I think representation is always important. Where there are diverse communities, there are organizations like the National Business League, like the National Urban League, and other groups where actual banks are now partnering with churches and things of that nature to give exposure. And they're moving from the ivory tower mindset of people coming to the institution. And now these institutions are now going out into the community and establishing relationships. And so you can always call me, but those are some short examples. And yes, there is a National Business League Lansing chapter, which is the evolved version of the Lansing Black Chamber, which are one organization. If you want that contact information, I would be happy to provide it. And like I said, it's a great opportunity now, and I appreciate that you're focused on the solutions in your particular environment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ken. Are there other questions for Dr. Harris?
Man, could I ask a question, please?
Absolutely. Bill White, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Doctor, for being on the call. Appreciate that. A quick observation and a question. I understand why you're a doctor, because if you've read all of those books in your background, that's pretty amazing. But more to the question, since I'm a local Detroit boy and spent all my life here, can you comment on the recent rather stark presentation in the papers regarding the black media and their issue with General Motors? Can you add a little color to that? What's that based in to educate us?
Bill, you get right to it in the morning. I love it. And most of the books back here are books that my students leave, so I get a chance to pick them up and take them home. But with that, no, what you're seeing is, and you've seen this throughout history as well, where the marginalized or the folks who feel like they don't have a voice, they start to speak out. And when they speak out, you find out if something is real or if something isn't real. So one thing I can say, the automotive industry is actually one of the best industries in terms of diversity and having a diverse program. To be honest with you, the big three in particular, especially GM, is one of the oldest supplier diversity programs in the entire country. And they actually formed right around civil rights and have not stopped from that point. So when they produce some data segments, and not saying that they don't have work to do, as all institutions have to reevaluate over time where they are in terms of statistics. And I've been on the phone with their executive leadership. I've also been on the phone with several major newspapers to give comments and to respond to the question that you just asked. But what you see are organizations now coming together. And if they don't feel that there is racial equity and not just equality, equity, and what I meant by that is measurable statistics and data that show that there's been progress being made besides press conferences, platitudes, and handshakes. That day is pretty much with technology and social media. You're going to see a concerted effort, not just from this group, but other groups to lift up and make transparent pushing towards racial equity. And so Byron Allen and his media group obviously have been pushing for this with GM for quite some time. But at the same time, I know GM has been doing a very good job in terms of suppliers. So hopefully when these two get together, and I hope that they get together and they air out and talk out what next steps are to take place, because as I mentioned before, I said marketing and advertising. That was one of the areas. When you see a large consumer base like Black Americans who purchase cars and vehicles, which employ a lot of people at GM, folks are asking for reciprocity. They're asking for return on inclusion, return on investment, and they're asking for the proof. And what they're saying is that we don't know of any Black or minority-owned companies that are advertising with GM. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know several major advertising companies. What is that percentage and how can it be better? And so you saw the response, I think, today, which was GM is saying they are making improvements and they do have examples of success. So this, again, is groups talking and coming together. So that's a solution to me. They have identified the problem. The problem sometimes hurts because it may not come out how we all want it to come out. But if we all come together and find a solution, I think we can move forward. And the great thing about GM, the way that they responded They responded to say, we want to move forward. We want to be an example. We want to be the best diverse company in the country. And that's the type of response that you want.
Thank you.
That answered your question, Bill.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Other questions for Dr. Harris? Here's one, Dr. Harris. So you have a variety of institutions on this call, large banks, small banks,
Yep.
Some in communities where the diversity is not as apparent, perhaps, as in Detroit. So how does one take the first step?
The first step is looking inside, looking internal, and starting there. And that's why I kind of made that message, Rand, very specific and central. Sometimes we try to conquer the world or prove to the world that we're doing something. I don't think it's that difficult. I think we should be simplistic in our design. We should look internally at ourselves first. Again, if I was to take a self-evaluation and walk around my building today, you can make a determination whether or not you're diverse and inclusive, starting at that point. And then talking to your staff, talking to the key internal and external stakeholders in your company. What is the diversity plan for the future? What does that look like? How are you going to measure it? And most importantly, is it just a small group of people that are not diverse creating these policies? And so hopefully, if you don't have diverse people in your company, Rand, for the great question that you answered, there's a ton of consultants out here who can help you implement a diversity plan. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are tons of models out here. You got Kenneth Kelly with First Independence Bank, who I think is on this call, who is the only Black bank here in the state of Michigan, and his leadership as the immediate past chair of the National Bankers Association gives a national
Absolutely.
context to this discussion. So I think we have to come together to find solutions. And so you have people here. So Rand, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, sir. Other questions?
Yeah,
I'm
Dr.
gonna ask
Harris,
one.
Yeah, hey, Alex.
Go ahead, Alex.
this is Alex Morris for the MBA as well. I just wanted to see if you would elaborate on a concept that really kind of you wove through all of your comments, and I think is really important. We here at the MBA have our own internal DEI group that we've started, and one of the conversations and concepts that I think is important to everybody on this call and is important to you as you spoke to is the economic and the business reason for diversity, the bottom line impact of a D&I effort at an organization like a bank or a business who at the end of the day also has to turn a profit to continue to function. Can you give us a little additional on that? Because I think that's extremely important to understand why this is not necessarily just a one-pronged approach, but there is many viable reasons for why this is an important endeavor to undertake.
Oh, no question. And I always like to relate this, Alex, to data and statistics. Again, your future depositor, your future commercial loan is going to be Black and brown. And so we can't ignore this. It's at your doorstep. It's knocking on the door. You may not see it because you got the door closed, right? And so these policies, if we are truly going to be the American dream that we all envision, it has to be a diverse dream because diversity is critical. But we also must acknowledge where we have not achieved the type of successes in diversity that we promised to do so long ago. And so first and foremost, Black people in general have never received reconciliation, reparation, or reward in terms of economics, access to capital, based on policy and data. They were totally excluded from the market up until the 1970s, and in some cases up till today. So we got to go back home to our original place where the problem exists. And we must straighten out our relationship and policies to address Black Americans and Indigenous people. And with that, minorities and other people of color come into context. But again, what does it look like? And so diversity has also been diluted, right? And I've had this conversation with GM's executives recently, as to where white women have been the biggest benefactors of civil rights based on gender. And there's absolutely misogyny and gender issues in America. But again, 40% of the plantations were owned by white women. And so we must really take a look at, from a data perspective, where are Blacks, and when we speak of minorities, we're speaking of Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, Native Americans, and Indigenous people who have been excluded from the economic mainstream of society, Alex. And so when we start with that context, how do we address that in a meaningful way to find solutions? And I think this is a wonderful opportunity. There's no perfect panacea way. There's just the way of coming together to say, you know what? We're going to be competitive as a bank in the future. We're going to expand our banking portfolio to not just be white males or white women. We're going to expand our outreach. We're going to get out into areas where we're uncomfortable, and we're going to have conversations. We're going to ask Kenneth Kelly and Rand to come speak to us regarding diversity initiatives, or bring on consultants that will allow for us to have a real internal, unbiased conversation. And that's where I think it starts. And I can tell you, the Michigan Bankers Association under Rand's leadership, we're going to do some amazing things together, because he gets it, he understands it. He not only grew up in it, so he has a visual eye of it, but most importantly, he knows how to connect the dots. And so this is the starting point, Alex. So I'm excited about the future.
When you talk about connecting the dots, and when you and I first connected several months ago on a call with Alyssa Slotkin and owners of businesses, entrepreneurs in her district, some of whom, as you said, had saved for their business under the mattress, like grandma did, or they had a relationship with the bank. They had a deposit relationship with the bank, but not a lending relationship. So they had an account at bank of whatever, but they did not have a relationship with Jamie, the banker. And there was a recognition there that had I had that relationship with Jamie, I could have gotten access a little bit faster. So flipping that, how do we as bankers who know that we have Jamie's out there, how do we reach out to them in an authentic, genuine way to encourage that building of relationship, to create that trust that you mentioned in the beginning?
Yeah, and Rand, that's an excellent question. And it's very simple. One, have the will to do it. The second thing is build relationships. Your network is your net worth, is what I always say. Connecting with your local church, connecting with your local NAACP, Urban League, or National Business League, connecting with institutions and structures wherever your target market is, you connect with them and you educate and you train. I was speaking to the president of Bank of America not too long ago, and the fact that some of the most experienced and knowledgeable people in the country are in the banking industry. So in terms of intellectual capital, the banking infrastructure provides a means to help not only Black and Indigenous businesses become bankable, but when there's opportunity for access to capital, Rand, that they are prepared to be able to apply for these monies that exist. And so in terms of technical assistance, in terms of support programs, by having a relationship with certain entities where a bank may partner with the church or even adopt a church in an urban area is critical. And then most importantly, not just being bankable, but investable now. Black and minority-owned businesses are growing 3 times the national rate. Blacks are moving into entrepreneurship faster than any segment in the entire country. Matter of fact, Black women by Forbes magazine is the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurship in the entire country, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, or gender, right? But they're undercapitalized in terms of revenue, production is low. In terms of hiring, there's still 1 to 3 employees. So we got work to do. There's an opportunity for the bank. You don't necessarily have to be giving out a loan, but you definitely can come in and help a person form a business plan, practice the 5 C's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a
Right.
huge opportunity out here, Rand, and I hope that I answered your question.
You did. Thank you, sir. And speaking of questions, we have time for one more before Kenneth has to go on and you all have to go back to your days as well. Do we have one more question for Dr. Harris? Any closing thoughts, Ken, that you'd like to share?
No, just at this time where obviously, you know, the PPP loans are essential right now for what has been predicted by CBS, Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, based on research out of California, that 40% of Black and minority-owned businesses either have closed their doors permanently or are 1 or 2 paychecks away. And so this environment that is critical to our recovery of our economy, it's essential that we educate and that we market our ability to get these grant or forgivable grants given by the federal government funded by taxpayers to Black and small business owners. And so whatever marketing efforts that we can do, whatever partnerships that you can provide, please do so. Whatever individuals in your banking institutions that can get out on virtual calls to help business owners connect and receive these taxpayer funded grant opportunities to survive. And we don't want them to just survive, we want them to thrive. And so with that, I leave that as kind of an action point. And I really thank the Michigan Bankers Association and everyone here today in your leadership, Rand and Patricia. Thank you all so much. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Again, we're grateful to you for your time today, for your perspectives, for the questions that came from the bankers on the call. Thank you for the reading list. There are lots of small bookshops in communities that we serve. So rather than ordering it to come and be left under a bush in the middle of the night, walk down the street. If you don't have a local bookseller, there's one he's holding up right now by the potential next comptroller of the currency. But Janet down at Source Booksellers in Detroit is a great local bookseller. If you don't have one in your town, she's a friend of both Kenneth and mine, and she's a great lady and can ship those directly to you, or better yet, you can pick them up when you're down on the Cass Corridor. Everyone, thanks so much for your time. For you bankers on the call, you've got time to check a few emails before we come back with our congressional visit starting at 9 o'clock, which Alex has organized for us. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week, a great Easter, a great Passover season, if that's what you celebrate. And have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dr. Harris.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rand.
Thank you, Dr. Harris.